The acrid smell of my burned-out house still clung to my hair when she strutted into my courtroom like she owned the building. There I sat, Judge Miriam Blackwood, black robes pressed, gavel resting under my palm, staring straight at the woman who had just committed arson against a sitting judge. The audacity of it made my jaw tighten. But Bryn Ashworth Sterling had no clue what she had stepped into. Because when you burn down a judge's home, you'd better pray she never gets the chance to return the favor, legally. And honey, I was moments away from serving a 5-course meal of justice with a generous side of federal prison time. This HOA Karen thought fire would silence me. Instead, it ignited something far more dangerous. That blaze lit a fuse that would burn through her entire criminal empire. Every illegal fine, every fraudulent violation, every intimidation tactic. I had documented it all. So ask yourself, what would you do if the person who destroyed your life handed themselves to you on a polished, silver legal platter? Wherever you're watching from, buckle up. Because this revenge turns ruthless. 6 months before my house became a crime scene, I was simply Judge Miriam Blackwood, respected, feared by criminals, and quietly shattered. I had just buried Harold after watching cancer consume him piece by agonizing piece. 28 years of marriage erased. Our 1940s craftsman home in Pinewood Estates felt less like shelter and more like a mausoleum. Pinewood hadn't always been like this. It was once a neighborhood of blue-collar families, retirees, teachers who tended rose gardens and waved from porches. Then the money arrived. Modest ranch homes vanished, replaced by towering McMansions with 3-car garages and climate-controlled wine cellars. Property taxes exploded. Longtime residents like Walt Henderson, who'd lived there since 1965, were suddenly told they weren't maintaining standards. And at the center of this gentrified invasion stood its queen bee, Bryn Ashworth Sterling. Imagine every entitled suburban nightmare you've ever met. Now dress her in designer athleisure, add a Tesla worth more than most people's yearly income, and top it off with a god complex. 45 years old. Always clutching a $20 superfood smoothie while lecturing everyone else on how they were living life wrong. She'd moved in 2 years earlier with her contractor husband and immediately announced her plan to elevate Pinewood to its full potential. Translation: remove the undesirables. My first encounter with Bryn happened while I was installing Harold's memorial fence. We had planned the 6-foot privacy barrier together during his final months. Our sanctuary. A place to drink coffee, watch sunrises, and be unseen. The morning air carried the sweet scent of his prize roses, still blooming after 15 years of his careful tending. I was working quietly when the crunch of expensive boots on autumn leaves announced her presence. You must be the widow. No condolences. No introduction. Just assessment. Judge Blackwood. I corrected calmly, wiping soil from my hands.
Right.
The judge. She said the title like it was contagious. I'm Bryn, HOA president. We have a problem. Out came the pink tape measure, her weapon of choice. The metallic snap sliced through the silence. She measured with theatrical precision, lips pursed in manufactured outrage. 6 feet, 2 inches. Regulations clearly state 6 feet maximum. That's a $500 violation plus removal costs. I straightened slowly, my spine stiff from grief and sleepless nights. Show me that regulation. Her manicured fingers flipped through a leather portfolio, nails clicking like miniature gavels. 5 minutes passed. Nothing, because the regulation didn't exist. My fence was exactly 6 feet. I'd hired a licensed surveyor for a reason. Well, she huffed, spray tan face tightening. We'll see about that, Judge. That venom told me everything. This wasn't about a fence. That night, alone with microwaved leftovers and Harold's favorite bourbon, I searched court records. There it was. 3 years earlier, Sterling Premium Builders had stood before my bench, attempting to scam an 80-year-old veteran out of $30,000 for fake emergency roof repairs. The roof had been fine. I'd ruled against them hard and referred them for contractor fraud investigation. This fence was retaliation. Bryn had made a fatal mistake. She targeted a woman who had spent 2 decades sentencing murderers, rapists, and con artists without blinking. A woman who had watched her soulmate die with dignity. Someone with nothing left to lose, and an intimate understanding of how the legal system could be turned into a weapon. I rested my hand on the rough wood of Harold's fence posts and remembered why we built it. Not to shut the world out, but to protect something sacred. Our memories. Our love. Our final project together. Bryn Ashworth Sterling had just declared war on a federal judge's sanctuary. In my courtroom, we had a technical term for that leave. L of stupidity. She had no idea what she had unleashed. Within 2 weeks, Bryn escalated into full-scale psychological warfare disguised as HOA enforcement. Certified letters flooded my mailbox, thick manila envelopes arriving, so often my mailman started apologizing. 7 registered letters in 10 days. Violation 1. Unapproved decorative garden feature. Harold's memorial stone. In memory of love that grows eternal, apparently violated Pinewood's uniform landscape aesthetic. Violation 2. Non-regulation mailbox color. My black mailbox had been there since Reagan was president. Suddenly, it was visual discord. Violation 3 made my teeth grind. Excessive bird feeding creating nuisance conditions. My single feeder attracted cardinals, Harold's favorite. Watching them had become my morning ritual, coffee steaming in the cold air, while I pretended he might walk up behind me. Each letter demanded fines ranging from $200 to $500, threatening liens and legal action. The paper stock alone probably cost more than the violations. But 20 years on the bench had trained me well. During law school, I'd memorized Colorado HOA statutes after a landlord tried similar intimidation. These notices were riddled with holes, non-existent regulations, missing hearings, no adopted bylaws. So, I went to work. 3 evenings in Harold's basement office, surrounded by his law books and the smell of old paper, I built my counterattack. Formal complaint to the Colorado Real Estate Commission. Photographs from every angle. Spreadsheets tracking illegal fine patterns. Evidence preservation, weaponized. Then Bryn crossed from harassment into crime. While I was downtown sentencing drunk drivers, my security cameras captured her in action. She arrived with an entourage, an interior designer dressed entirely in white and her personal trainer, now apparently a property inspector. For 2 hours they staged violations. The designer gestured dramatically at Harold's roses. The trainer scribbled notes on official-looking clipboards. Fraud. Plain and simple. That evening, Walt Henderson knocked on my door, pipe tobacco mixing with cool air. Judge, this woman's targeting everyone. The Rodriguez family, fined for their Virgin of Guadalupe statue until they sold and fled. A single mother fined for her kids' chalk drawings, rainbows and hopscotch deemed aesthetic violations. The pattern snapped into focus. This wasn't personal. It was systemic. Hispanic families. Single mothers. Elderly residents. Fixed incomes. And now a widowed judge who had once shut down her husband's scam. Discrimination wrapped in HOA paperwork. Fraud backed by intimidation. As my pen scratched across Harold's desk, documenting every detail, I heard his voice in my head. Good legal strategy is like surgery, precise, methodical, devastating when done right. I was about to operate. Part 2, rewritten, same length, same story, elevated impact. Bryn Ashworth Sterling had built herself a tiny kingdom of petty tyranny, and she'd made the oldest mistake in the book. She targeted someone who knew exactly how to dismantle power structures piece by piece using the very legal system she'd been twisting into a weapon for her personal vendettas. Harold used to joke that judges were just referees with law degrees and permanent attitudes. It was time to show this HOA Karen what happens when you pick a fight with someone who writes the rules of engagement for a living. Bryn's next move pushed her from harassment straight into felony territory. Apparently, manufactured violations weren't intimidating enough, so she decided that breaking and entering might send a clearer message. She struck while I was downtown sentencing a wife-beater to 18 months. My security cameras recorded every criminal second of her so-called emergency property inspection, a legal authority that existed only inside her delusional imagination. There she was, bold as brass in designer yoga pants, strutting through my backyard like she held the deed. Pink tape measure swinging from her manicured hand, snapping photographs from angles that would have embarrassed a paparazzi stalker. The audacity peaked when she pressed her face against my kitchen window, shading her eyes to peer inside at Harold's coffee mug still sitting on the counter, the one I still couldn't bring myself to wash. But her stupidity reached a new level when she deliberately left my back gate wide open. Not careless. Deliberate. The footage showed her yanking it open, checking the latch, then walking away with a satisfied smirk. When I got home that evening, bone-tired from hours of domestic violence testimony, I found my sanctuary violated. And my worst fear realized. Gavel was gone. My 14-year-old Tabby wasn't just a pet. He was Harold's final gift to me, rescued from the courthouse parking lot during a thunderstorm 3 years earlier. The cat who'd curled up on Harold's lap during chemo, purring comfort into pain. My last living connection to 28 years of marriage. The panic hit like a physical blow. For 3 days I searched, my voice shredded from calling his name through alleys, yards, and storm drains within a 6-block radius. Walt Henderson organized neighborhood search parties. Even the Rodriguez family, who'd moved away because of Bryn's harassment, drove back to help. Then came the phone call that froze my blood. Judge Blackwood, this is Dr. Martinez at Mountain View Animal Emergency. Someone brought in a cat matching your description. He's in very bad shape. I found Gavel barely conscious in an oxygen tent, ribs broken, severely dehydrated, trauma etched into every shallow breath. $800 in emergency surgery later, the vet delivered the words that made my hands shake with rage. These injuries are consistent with being chased by machinery. High-powered leaf blowers. Lawn equipment. The stress alone nearly killed him. The footage confirmed it. 1 hour after Bryn's illegal trespass, her landscaping crew arrived with industrial leaf blowers. Through the open gate she'd left behind, they terrorized my already traumatized cat. They chased him 2 blocks until he fell into a storm drain, broken, trapped, and dying. This was no longer harassment. This was attempted murder of my family. And here was Bryn's fatal mistake. She'd committed multiple felonies against a sitting judge who understood exactly how to weaponize the legal system for maximum destruction. I changed every lock, posted no trespassing signs, filed criminal charges for unlawful entry and animal cruelty. Then I made one phone call that shifted everything. Channel 7's Sarah Morgan, a pitbull journalist with a talent for exposing suburban corruption. When Judge vs. HOA, when Watchdog's attack aired 3 nights later, the fallout was immediate. Sarah's investigation exposed Bryn's systematic targeting of minority and elderly residents, complete with security footage of her trespassing and the landscaping crew's attack on Gavel. The community response was nuclear. Donations poured in, not just for vet bills, but legal fees to dismantle the HOA entirely. Justice for Gavel exploded across social media. 3 law firms offered pro bono representation. The Colorado Attorney General's office called to discuss civil rights violations. Most devastating of all, 5 more families came forward. Elderly Mrs. Morgan forced to dismantle her late husband's memorial garden. The Johnson family fined into bankruptcy for installing a wheelchair ramp for their disabled son. A clear pattern of targeting anyone who didn't fit Bryn's vision of suburban perfection. But the real turning point came buried deep in Colorado's property protection statutes. Unlawful entry with intent to intimidate carried the same penalties as burglary. Animal cruelty charges could be stacked with conspiracy if multiple actors were involved. Bryn's landscaping crew hadn't committed one crime. They created a federal RICO predicate. That night, Gavel finally purred against my chest for the first time since the attack. The sound blended with the hum of my new security system and the steady click of my keyboard as I drafted criminal complaints that would end Bryn's reign permanently. Harold used to say judges were referees with long memories. Time to show this suburban terrorist what happens when you torture a federal judge's family. She'd escalated from civil violations to felony assault. My response would be biblical. Bryn's desperation went nuclear when she realized her trespassing had backfired into federal charges. So she did what narcissists always do. She tried to destroy my career before I could destroy hers. The complaint arrived Tuesday morning by certified mail. Colorado Judicial Discipline Commission letterhead that made my coffee taste like ash. Her allegations read like satire. Judge Blackwood abuses judicial authority to intimidate law-abiding homeowners, weaponizing the legal system for personal vendettas that threaten community safety. The evidence was criminally creative. Doctored photos portraying my memorial garden as urban decay. Falsified witness statements from her designer and trainer claiming I'd threatened them. Timestamps so sloppy, they'd make a CSI tech laugh out loud. Her nuclear option? She leaked everything to political blogs that opposed my environmental rulings. Within hours, I was trending. Liberal judge terrorizes patriotic HOA. Comment sections exploded with keyboard warriors demanding impeachment, disbarment, and inventive punishments for activist judges. For 72 hours, I watched 20 years of judicial service get shredded by people who couldn't spell jurisprudence, but somehow knew constitutional law better than federal judges. Then salvation arrived carrying homemade cookies. Patricia, Pat, Donnelly looked like everyone's retired librarian. Sensible cardigan, orthopedic shoes, hands trembling slightly with age. What she didn't look like was a 25-year FBI veteran specializing in financial crimes, who had been surveilling Bryn for weeks. "Judge, I think you should see this," she said, settling into Harold's chair with calm authority. Pat spread photographs across my kitchen table like cards in a high-stakes game. Meet Bethany Sterling of Phoenix, Arizona. 3 insurance claims in 2 years. Flood. Electrical fire. Vandalism. $400,000 in payouts. Gone right before grand juries convened. My judicial instincts flared. Pattern recognition like DNA evidence. She's done this before. Textbook. Pat nodded. Target established neighborhoods. Create conflicts. File claims. Disappear. Then came the beauty. She filed her current homeowner's policy under a false identity. Federal mail fraud. The documents made my prosecutor's heart sing. Her $800,000 house insured for $2.8 million. Lies about prior claims. Identity changes. Financial history that would make federal prosecutors cry tears of joy. She's not targeting you for revenge, Pat continued. You're the distraction. While everyone watches HOA drama, she's draining association funds and preparing another accidental fire. The realization hit like a gavel to the skull. This wasn't personal. It was misdirection. Pat slid over a manila folder thick enough to choke a defense attorney. Sterling Premium Builders filed bankruptcy last month. License suspended for tax evasion. The HOA presidency was never about control. It was about access to money. My harassment hadn't been random. It was professional distraction. Part 3, rewritten, same length, same story, intensified precision. Keeping a federal judge distracted with petty disputes while she quietly robbed an entire community blind. But Pat's final revelation made my blood run cold. She's already filed preliminary insurance claims, Pat said carefully, citing developing structural issues and increasing neighborhood safety concerns. Your house isn't just a target, Judge. It's scheduled to become evidence in her next insurance scam. That evening, I sat surrounded by proof that transformed my personal nightmare into a full-scale federal RICO case. Bank records showing $340,000 siphoned from HOA emergency funds. Insurance applications packed with enough lies to support perjury charges. A systematic pattern of targeting minorities and elderly residents that screamed civil rights violations. Bryn hadn't chosen me because I ruled against her husband. She chose me because terrorizing a federal judge created the perfect smokescreen for large-scale theft and fraud preparation. But in her arrogance, she'd made a catastrophic error. Instead of preying on defenseless retirees, she committed federal crimes against someone who knew exactly how to dismantle criminal enterprises using every weapon in the federal legal arsenal. The soft glow of my computer screen filled Harold's office as I drafted communications to federal prosecutors specializing in interstate fraud and civil rights cases. Harold used to say patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon when wielded by someone who understood timing. Bryn Ashworth Sterling was about to learn that running insurance scams while terrorizing a federal judge wasn't just stupid. It was life sentence stupid. The manila envelope Pat slid across my kitchen table felt heavier than a death sentence. Inside were photographs that made my hands tremble and my prosecutor's instincts ignite. "Judge," Pat said quietly, her voice weighted by 25 years of hunting federal criminals, "what I'm about to show you changes everything." Bryn Ashworth Sterling doesn't exist. The first photo showed a California driver's license from 2018. Rebecca Ashworth. Bryn's face smiled back at me. The second showed Beth Sterling from Phoenix. Same woman, different identity. The third made my coffee cup slip from numb fingers. Sandra Mackenzie.
Detroit.
2010, a federal prisoner ID number stamped across the bottom. "She's a professional community destroyer," Pat explained, arranging evidence with surgical precision. 4 states. 6 identities. Systematic HOA infiltration followed by embezzlement and insurance fraud. Over $4 million stolen in the past decade. My judicial instincts took over, but the personal horror cracked my voice. "How many families?" 15 confirmed, Pat replied. Always the same pattern. Target established neighborhoods. Harass minorities and elderly residents. Drain emergency funds. Then burn high-value properties for insurance payouts. Her FBI instincts were razor-sharp despite retirement. In Sacramento, 3 Hispanic families were forced out before the community center mysteriously burned. In Phoenix, 5 elderly residents died from stress-related health complications during Bryn's reign of terror. Then came the document that froze my blood solid. Architectural plans of my house, pulled from Sterling Premium Builders contractor database. Detailed notes marked electrical vulnerabilities, foundation access points, optimal fire acceleration zones. "She's been planning to burn your house since day one," Pat said softly. "The harassment was misdirection while she prepared the arson." My property was valued at $180,000. Harold's life insurance-funded upgrades had pushed the rebuild value to $320,000. Bryn planned to claim fire spread to her own property, triggering both policies for maximum payout. My hands shook as I traced Harold's handwritten electrical notes in the margins, work we'd done together during his final months, trying to leave something solid behind. Bryn had turned our love into her criminal opportunity, but Pat's final revelation shattered every assumption I'd made. "She's not just a criminal, Judge. She's a federal fugitive, operating under stolen identities while technically still in witness protection." Bryn Mackenzie had testified against a Detroit fraud ring in 2012. 18 months federal time. Disappeared from the program in 2015. The implications hit like a gavel to the skull. She was running organized crime while protected by federal witness systems, stealing taxpayer-funded identities to commit the very crimes she'd sworn off. "Witness protection violation alone carries 10 years minimum," Pat continued. "Add multi-state fraud, identity theft, and attempted arson against a federal judge? She's looking at life without parole." I stared at photos of families she destroyed. Communities left hollow. Elderly residents who died from stress-induced heart attacks during her campaigns. My nightmare was just another chapter in a decade-long federal crime spree. The musty scent of old case files mixed with bitterness as the scope became clear. She hadn't targeted me by chance. She researched Harold's death, my finances, my schedule, my emotional vulnerabilities. But she made one fatal mistake. She ran federal crimes against someone who knew how to coordinate multi-jurisdictional prosecutions across every federal agency from the FBI to the Treasury. My kitchen became a federal war room overnight. By Thursday evening, Pat, Walt, and attorney Rebecca Morgan sat around Harold's table like avenging angels. Evidence boxes surrounded us, enough to bury Bryn's empire 6 feet deep. Rebecca Morgan was a predator in designer suits. Former federal prosecutor turned white-collar defense attorney who'd never lost a RICO case, and she looked thrilled. "Judge," Rebecca said, spreading color-coded flowcharts across the table like World War II battle plans, "we're not prosecuting HOA harassment. We're dismantling a decade-long federal crime spree that destroyed 15 communities and stole over $4 million. The room smelled of fresh legal paper and Walt's pipe tobacco as we finalized our three-pronged assault: federal annihilation, state prosecution, and civil rights demolition. Rebecca's strategy was surgical and biblical. Mail fraud across state lines, 20-year minimum. Wire fraud adds another 20. Identity theft involving witness protection, 10 mandatory. RICO conspiracy for systematic community destruction, life without parole. She smiled like a shark tasting blood. She'll be locked up until climate change floods the prison. Pat coordinated federal agencies with retired FBI efficiency that made current agents look like mall security. Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Treasury Financial Crimes. FBI Interstate Fraud Task Force. They were salivating. By morning, Bryn would be under more surveillance than a terrorist cell. My role was evidence preservation and victim coordination, skills honed over 20 years of complex prosecutions. HOA finances were transparent to anyone who knew how to ask properly. We were about to demand 5 years of accounting and watch her embezzlement collapse in daylight. Walt's neighborhood network became our intelligence backbone. 60 years of relationships formed an information web the CIA would envy. Everyone she terrorized is documenting everything, Walt said. Mrs. Rodriguez is driving back from Phoenix with 17 witnesses. The Johnson family has disability discrimination records that'll make prosecutors cry. But the most satisfying upgrade was surveillance. Pat transformed my modest security system into federal-grade evidence collection, every angle calibrated for courtroom impact. And here's the beauty, she said, testing audio equipment that could capture conversations 3 houses away. She's still committing crimes. Every fraudulent fine, every harassment letter, every illegal HOA transfer. All of it was being recorded. Part 4, rewritten, same length, same story, maximum escalation. Created real-time evidence for federal prosecutors. Rebecca handled immediate legal protection with the ruthless efficiency of someone who'd built her career dismantling white-collar criminals molecule by molecule. Emergency injunctions froze HOA accounts before sunrise. Criminal complaints were filed simultaneously in 3 jurisdictions. Civil rights violations were submitted to the Colorado Attorney General for systematic targeting based on ethnicity and age. The financial implications were catastrophic for Bryn's operation. During my judicial career, I'd learned that the Homeowners Protection Act required insurers to notify mortgage holders when fraud investigations were triggered. Bryn's insurance scams would force audits of every Pinewood policy, saving neighbors hundreds of thousands in inflated premiums while annihilating her credibility with every insurance carrier in the country. Our emergency protocols assumed a hard truth. Cornered criminals become desperate, and desperate criminals become dangerous. Rebecca arranged protective surveillance for vulnerable residents, elderly neighbors, families with small children. Federal case history showed that fraudsters facing life sentences often escalated to violence. By midnight, we'd constructed a legal machine designed for total annihilation of Bryn's criminal enterprise, with maximum protection for every victim she'd terrorized. The precision was breathtaking, the scope overwhelming, the outcome inevitable. When this is over, Rebecca summarized with cold prosecutorial satisfaction, then Mackenzie will spend the rest of her life in federal maximum security. Sterling Premium Builders will be liquidated for restitution. Every harassed resident will receive compensation plus punitive damages. And we'll establish legal precedent protecting communities nationwide from predators like her. The quiet hum of my upgraded security system blended with the soft click of my keyboard as I drafted victim impact statements calibrated to make federal judges demand maximum sentences. Harold always said patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon when combined with overwhelming force applied at the perfect psychological moment. By morning, professional criminal Bryn Ashworth Sterling would learn that terrorizing a federal judge's community wasn't just catastrophically stupid. It was life sentence stupid. Time to execute justice with extreme legal prejudice. Bryn's response to our offensive proved she'd crossed from petty harassment into full-scale domestic terrorism. Her desperation was about to turn my neighborhood into a crime scene that would make federal prosecutors salivate. The attack came Tuesday afternoon while I was downtown sentencing a wife beater. Perfect alibi timing she'd clearly researched through my public court calendar. My military-grade security system captured every felonious second in courtroom quality, high definition. At 2:47 p.m., unmarked trucks rolled in, disgorging a crew that moved with professional efficiency. These weren't landscapers. They were arson specialists, coveralls, specialized equipment, and one purpose only: turning my home into an insurance fire that would conveniently spread to Bryn's property for maximum payout. The cameras recorded them creating accelerant highways around my foundation, installing unmarked propane connections near electrical panels, and positioning dead vegetation to guarantee directional fire spread toward Bryn's million-dollar asset. The precision was chilling. The intent unmistakable. The evidence devastating. Bryn's nuclear stupidity peaked when she arrived with Channel 7's news crew, claiming she'd received anonymous tips about dangerous fire hazards at the judge's residence. "Community safety is my only concern," she told Sarah Morgan, standing directly over planted evidence of her own arson conspiracy. When public officials ignore fire prevention, innocent neighbors could die. The audacity was breathtaking. The federal charges would be biblical. My phone exploded with alerts from Pat's surveillance network. Walt photographed the entire crew from multiple angles. Mrs. Rodriguez captured license plates clear enough to make lineups unnecessary. Even the postal worker documented suspicious activity while delivering what would become the last mail my house would ever receive. Then Fire Marshal Jake Morrison arrived for the inspection Bryn herself had demanded. Morrison was a 30-year arson veteran whose trained eyes spotted staged evidence instantly. "Judge," he said quietly, kneeling beside artificial accelerant patterns, "someone is setting your house up to burn. This isn't a code violation. This is premeditated murder." Soil analysis later confirmed professional-grade accelerants. Gas connections violated 16 safety codes and carried fingerprints matching Sterling Premium's contractor database. Placement patterns demonstrated expert knowledge of fire behavior, insurance investigations, and how to engineer accidental blazes that triggered maximum payouts. "Whoever planned this knows how to kill people and make it look like electrical failure," Morrison said, disgust evident. "This is systematic preparation for insurance fraud through homicide." Bryn's desperation hit crescendo when Morrison refused to condemn my property. Her response, captured on his department-issued body camera, was a brazen cash bribe. "Inspector, surely we can handle this efficiently," she said, sliding a thick envelope across his clipboard. "Community safety requires cooperation." The body cam recorded every word, every gesture, every flicker of shock when Morrison informed her that bribing a public official was a federal felony carrying 10-year minimum sentences. The community response was immediate. Pat's network identified similar arson preparations at 3 additional homes, elderly residents, minority families, same pattern. Federal agents swarmed Pinewood like antibodies attacking infection. Rebecca's response was swift and merciless. Federal warrants issued within hours for Bryn, her husband, and every conspirator. Bank accounts frozen under RICO authority. Sterling Premium placed under federal asset forfeiture. The irony was exquisite. Bryn's planted evidence became forensic proof of premeditated arson conspiracy. Her bribery attempt stacked federal corruption charges atop existing felonies like legal dominoes. That evening, the smell of accelerant still hung in the air, but it no longer smelled like destruction. It smelled like justice. My hands trembled as I realized how close I'd come to dying in Harold's house, surrounded by memories, while Bryn collected insurance money on my corpse. She hadn't planned theft. She'd planned murder. But her arrogance had detonated her own empire. Every accelerant became evidence. Every bribe another felony. Every silenced witness now cooperated with prosecutors trained in maximum sentencing. The low hum of federal surveillance mixed with distant coordination of dawn raids that would end Bryn's reign permanently. Harold always said justice delayed wasn't justice denied. Sometimes it was justice being sharpened. At 3:17 a.m., the explosion ripped me from dreams of Harold into a nightmare that would haunt Bryn Ashworth Sterling for the rest of her life in federal prison. I was sleeping in Walt's guest room, my home evacuated after the arson setup, when the blast shook windows 3 blocks away. From his bedroom window, I watched 28 years of memories erupt into hellish orange daylight. Harold's house, our sanctuary, the kitchen where we planned retirement, the bedroom where I held him through his final nights, the memorial garden where his ashes rested among roses he'd tended for 15 years. All of it vanished into flame and federal evidence. The fire burned so a hot Denver fire established a 3-block perimeter. Professional arsonists had turned my home into a controlled inferno. Part 5. Rewritten, same length, same events, elevated power and clarity. The demolition had been expertly disguised as an electrical malfunction, using techniques designed to guarantee total destruction while aligning perfectly with optimal insurance payout windows. But Bryn's criminal overconfidence had just assembled the most elegant snare in modern federal prosecution history. I stood on Walt's porch wrapped in Harold's old bathrobe, watching our life collapse into flame as federal arson investigator Marcus Webb coordinated a scene that resembled a domestic terror attack rather than a house fire. "Judge, this wasn't random," Webb said grimly. Thermal imaging revealed accelerant patterns forming flawless fire corridors. Someone intended to kill you and make it look accidental. The evidence was overwhelming and miraculously intact. My security system, protected inside fireproof housing, survived the inferno and recorded every incriminating second. Footage showed Sterling Premium's crew entering at 2:45 a.m., followed by Bryn's husband at 3:10 a.m., carrying professional-grade fire acceleration equipment. But the fatal blow to her defense came from an unexpected source. Insurance investigator Jennifer Park discovered that Bryn had filed preliminary claims for fire damage spreading from a neighboring property at 2:30 a.m., 47 minutes before my house was even ignited. She had submitted paperwork predicting damage before the fire existed. "That's not foresight," Park explained with prosecutorial satisfaction. "That's documentary proof of premeditated murder." The neighborhood reacted instantly. Neighbors arrived with coffee, blankets, and a righteous fury intense enough that federal agents began taking notes. Mrs. Rodriguez clutched my hands, tears pouring freely. "Mija, she tried to kill you. We all saw her planning this." Then came the moment that would live forever in federal prosecution lore. Bryn arrived at the fire scene. At 4:30 a.m., she appeared in designer athleisure and flawless makeup, expressing deep concern to news cameras while standing 50 feet from the house she had ordered destroyed. Her performance was chilling, Oscar-level acting fueled by complete sociopathic detachment from reality. This tragic accident reinforces why our HOA must enforce strict safety standards, she told Channel 7 with rehearsed sorrow. Judge Blackwood's refusal to cooperate with inspections may have contributed to this devastating loss of life. What she didn't know was that FBI agents were recording every word for her future murder trial, while federal marshals were already drafting Dawn arrest warrants based on evidence so airtight that plea deals were mathematically impossible. The financial investigation exposed criminal brilliance wrapped in homicidal stupidity. Bryn had embezzled $340,000 in HOA funds to pay professional arsonists. Her insurance policy valued her home at $2.8 million despite an $800,000 purchase price. The pre-filed fire spread claims would have triggered payouts large enough to destabilize regional insurers. But federal prosecutors had been tracking every transaction since Pat's investigation began. Bank records showed payments to known arson crews. Cell phone data placed both conspirators at the ignition site. Insurance applications contained lies sufficient to guarantee perjury convictions nationwide. Rebecca Morgan's response was swift and biblical. Federal marshals arrested both Ashworth Sterlings in coordinated dawn raids broadcast live on national television. Assets were seized under RICO forfeiture to compensate victims across 4 states. Sterling Premium was dismantled faster than shredded evidence. The charges were devastatingly beautiful: attempted murder of a federal judge, first-degree arson, multi-jurisdictional insurance fraud, money laundering, criminal conspiracy, and RICO violations that would keep them imprisoned until archaeologists unearthed their remains. That night, I sat in Walt's kitchen surrounded by federal agents from multiple states coordinating the largest HOA fraud prosecution in American history. Smoke still clung to my clothes, but it no longer smelled like loss. It smelled like justice being forged under extreme heat. My house was gone, but Harold's memory lived on in the community that protected me when his sanctuary could not. Bryn had tried to murder me in my sleep, and instead created evidence that would imprison her until the sun burned out. The sound of handcuffs clicking on the news felt like Harold whispering approval from whatever legal afterlife judges inhabit. Some battles are worth losing everything to win forever. 7 days after my home became a federal crime scene, Bryn Ashworth Sterling entered my courtroom in chains, orange jumpsuit replacing designer athleisure, facing charges that would outlast her lifetime. The irony was exquisite, so perfect it felt orchestrated by Harold himself. The courtroom overflowed beyond capacity. Federal marshals, FBI agents, insurance investigators, and prosecutors from 4 states filled the gallery like an army preparing for judgment. Channel 7 positioned cameras for maximum spectacle. The Colorado Attorney General sat in the front row drafting civil rights legislation in real time. Most powerful of all, 17 families Bryn had terrorized were present. Mrs. Rodriguez, the Johnsons and their disabled son, elderly residents driven from their homes by calculated harassment. Judge Patricia Morrison, my colleague handling the arraignment after my recusal, called the court to order with the gravity reserved for domestic terrorism cases. The people of Colorado versus Ben McKenzie, she began, also known as Bethany Sterling, Rebecca Ashworth, and Sandra Mitchell. The aliases took 30 seconds to read. The charges took 4 minutes. Attempted murder of a federal judge. First-degree arson. Multi-state insurance fraud. Money laundering. Criminal conspiracy. RICO violations. Identity theft. Witness intimidation. Systematic civil rights abuse. Bryn's public defender, clearly the unluckiest attorney in legal history, requested reasonable bond based on community ties. Federal prosecutor Amanda Stevens rose with the calm confidence of someone holding an unbeatable hand. Your Honor, this defendant has operated under 6 identities across 4 states, stolen over $4 million, destroyed 15 communities, and attempted to murder a sitting federal judge by burning down her home. The gallery rumbled with fury. Then Bryn made the catastrophic decision to speak. Your Honor, she said, turning toward me with undiminished arrogance, Judge Blackwood has weaponized the federal government against lawful HOA authority. This prosecution is judicial abuse disguised as justice. Silence fell like a tomb. Judge Morrison's response carried 2 decades of federal authority. Ms. McKenzie, you stand accused of attempting to murder a federal judge in her sleep. You embezzled emergency funds. You operated under false identities. You terrorized elderly and minority residents. She paused. You are not the victim of a vendetta. You are a domestic terrorist. Bryn's face finally collapsed as the weight of life sentences crushed her delusion. Bond is denied, Morrison declared. Remand to federal custody. The courtroom erupted. Mrs. Rodriguez sobbed. End of Part 5. Send Part 6 when ready. Part 6, rewritten, same length, same meaning, final resolution, and aftermath. Relief swept the courtroom. Walt pumped his fist like his team had just won the World Series. 17 families who had lived under Bryn's reign of intimidation finally watched justice being delivered at maximum temperature. As federal marshals led her away in chains, Bryn twisted toward me one last time, eyes blazing with a hatred intense enough to power small cities. This isn't over, Judge, she spat. You'll never prove I specifically targeted you for murder. The room went silent. I stood, black robes carrying 2 decades of federal authority, and spoke the words that sealed the fate of a domestic terrorist forever. Mrs. McKenzie, the court notes your statement as a voluntary admission that this conduct was targeted harassment. Federal prosecutors now have documented evidence of premeditated intent. Thank you for eliminating any remaining reasonable doubt. The sound of justice settling into place echoed through the courtroom like Harold's final approval. 2 years later, I stood in my rebuilt kitchen watching Cardinals feast at Harold's Memorial Theater while Bryn Mackenzie served her daily portion of justice inside federal maximum security. Life without parole, alone in concrete silence where domestic terrorists spend eternity contemplating the choices that destroyed them. The bitterness of morning coffee blended perfectly with the satisfaction of knowing evil had received exactly what it deserved. The trials became prosecutors' dreams and defense attorneys' nightmares. Federal juries needed 3 hours and 47 minutes to convict both Ashworth Sterlings on every count. Apparently, they'd paused only for lunch. Bryn received life without parole for attempted murder of a federal judge, followed by consecutive sentences for arson, fraud, and civil rights violations that would keep her incarcerated until climate change turned Colorado into beachfront property. Her husband earned 25 years for conspiracy, ensuring Sterling Premium's criminal enterprise was permanently extinct. The $3.2 million seized under RICO forfeiture was distributed to victims across 4 states, creating the largest HOA fraud restitution in American legal history. Every targeted family received compensation plus punitive damages, establishing precedents that now protect communities nationwide from future predators. But the real victory unfolded in Pinewood's rebirth. Once a kingdom of fear, it became a model community studied by law schools. Walt Henderson was unanimously elected HOA president, implementing transparency systems that made embezzlement impossible and resident protections that guaranteed due process. Reformed bylaws required community approval for fines over $50, mandatory mediation before legal action, and monthly financial reports published online. Most importantly, systematic targeting based on ethnicity, age, or income was explicitly banned, with automatic removal for any board member who violated the rule. The ripple effects spread nationwide. Colorado passed the Pinewood Protection Act, mandating HOA transparency, limiting fine authority, and imposing state oversight on abusive communities. 15 other states followed suit, protecting millions from future Bryn Mackenzies while their inspiration decayed behind federal bars. The Judge Harold Blackwood Memorial Scholarship grew beyond anything we imagined. Documentary rights, book sales, and donations from grateful communities raised $750,000 for first-generation college students studying community law and civil rights. This year's standout recipient was Maria Rodriguez, the daughter of the family Bryn terrorized, now headed to Harvard Law with dreams of defending vulnerable communities nationwide. Our annual Pinewood Justice Festival drew thousands celebrating collective triumph over individual evil. Local vendors donated proceeds to legal defense funds helping other neighborhoods fight corruption. Walt's Bluegrass Band headlined. Pat Donnelly ran packed workshops on financial crime investigation that helped residents in 47 states uncover and prosecute HOA fraud. Through our Community Resource Center, neighborhoods learned how to document harassment, trace financial crimes, and coordinate federal investigations. 41 copycat criminals were arrested using our model, saving thousands of families from similar terror. My judicial career earned national recognition for ethical courage under extreme pressure, leading to speaking invitations at law schools nationwide. The American Bar Association established the Blackwood Award honoring judges who defend civil rights against systematic oppression. But personal victory mattered more. Gavel recovered completely and now ruled our rebuilt sanctuary with feline authority capable of intimidating federal marshals. The memorial garden bloomed brighter than ever, Harold's roses thriving in soil enriched by community love and protected against any future terror. This evening, golden light streamed through new windows as I reviewed scholarship applications while Gavel supervised from his throne. Outside, Pat tended her victory garden. Walt taught neighborhood kids harmonica. Families gathered freely, something Bryn's reign had once made impossible. Children's laughter replaced sirens and confrontation, proving justice isn't just punishment. It's protection, healing, hope. And for anyone battling HOA nightmares or petty tyrants armed with clipboards and measuring tapes, here's my message. Document everything. Organize your neighbors. Bullies only win when good people stay silent. Your horror story could become someone else's salvation. Drop a comment sharing your HOA nightmare. You're not alone. And subscribe for more HOA stories, because next week we're exposing the tax assessor who tried stealing an entire neighborhood for personal profit. That reckoning was equally biblical. Justice always wins when communities stand together.